Welcome to Podmetto Politics. I'm Jared Wiggins, and we have a incredibly special episode for y'all today. Earlier this week, I went to Columbia with Chris Fideli and Courtney Thomas, and we got to sit down with an incredible woman who is a mother, and she is an educator and a small business owner, and she just so happens to be the spouse of a now very recently former candidate for the 2020 presidential nomination. And that amazing woman was Amy O'Rourke, the wife of Beto O'Rourke. We were probably going to push this episode out early next week, but due to the timeliness of Beto dropping out of the race, we decided to go ahead and just get this episode out there. So I'm getting an intro knocked out on my own, and I'll kind of fill you in here about Amy and what we talked about. But I really do appreciate Chris and Courtney coming along to Columbia in the pouring rain and taking the time to sit down with Amy, and we all got to meet her incredible team. But we'll talk about more of that after the interview. But Amy is amazing, and we here at Podmetto never want to introduce somebody as the spouse of a political candidate because they're always much more than that. They are driving the family, and many of them come to the table with careers of their own. So just a little bit about Amy. She began her career in a classroom. Just a few months after she graduated from college, she moved to Guatemala City, and she taught kindergarten at a school there in Guatemala. And her position gave her firsthand experience in implementing a high-quality dual language program, which is super impressive. And then after that, she moved to El Paso in 2004. She kept teaching at the time in a first and second grade classroom, and she started to plug into local community organizations to understand the educational gaps in the region and how she could help solve problems around those gaps. What was incredibly interesting, and you'll hear the story in the interview we have with Amy, is how she met Beto. But about that same time that she met Beto, she started working in the nonprofit realm and kind of bridging the gap between nonprofits and education, and then really helping families in her region, especially Hispanic families, from what we've seen, plug into the education system in a really meaningful way. So Amy was very open with us and very honest with us, and she talked about what it's been like on the campaign trail, not just in South Carolina, but over the past couple of years. The O'Rourke family is probably one of the only families that has been on a very high-profile, constant campaign cycle since, running for the Texas Senate seat in 2018, and then transitioning right into a presidential campaign not long after. But Amy talks about the decision-making process of what it was like to make decisions to run for public office, not just for the presidency, but for the Senate seat, and as well as when Beto first came to her as a city councilman in El Paso and said that he wanted to potentially run for Congress. Her reaction is priceless and one of the funnier moments with Amy. She also talks about the role of their children in deciding to run for office and how they let them communicate, as a family unit, their comfort level with dad getting out there and doing various things. It was a great interview, so we really appreciate Amy. She also talks about the gun control issues and the women's rights issues that her and Beto really championed. And I think, especially when it comes to these gun control discussions, we will see Beto's language being picked up by other candidates and continued through this cycle. So we are going to take a quick break, and we will be back with Chris Fideli, Courtney Thomas, myself, and former 2020 presidential candidate's wife, Beto's wife, Amy O'Rourke, who's also a small business owner and an educator. And we're back. We are in Columbia today in the Richland County Library System, hanging out with, like Chris said, a very special guest. We have with us, all the way from El Paso, Texas, Amy O'Rourke.
Hi, I'm
Welcome.
really happy to be here.
So we're excited to have you here. So you are visiting South Carolina. First off, we should introduce you for folks who aren't aware based on your last name. But you have somebody special in your life who's running for president. You might be somebody you know kind of well. But Beto O'Rourke, former congressman from Texas, in 2018 Senate candidate against Ted Cruz, who, by the way, shares a birthday with me. And it's like the worst part of my life.
Wait, hold on. Ted Cruz or Beto?
Ted Cruz shares a birthday with me.
I'm so sorry.
We're both Capricorns, but I'm a good Capricorn and he's an evil Capricorn. Anyways, Amy's
Really
here with us
important
today. We're
information.
super excited to have you. You've been in South Carolina, kind of trekking around the state. Where have you been today? Do you know where you've been?
Yes. I started the morning off in Charleston. I flew in last night, so spent the morning there, and then we drove here early this afternoon. And I just have to say, this library is spectacular.
Isn't it amazing?
It is.
This is my childhood library, and they have definitely leveled up in like the 15 years since I've been back here.
It's very nice.
Wild.
Was this your first trip to South Carolina?
This is my second trip to South Carolina,
Okay.
but my first time before this was in college and was a really brief
Okay, so
trip
first
with some
campaign
friends.
trip. Yeah.
First really meaningful trip to South Carolina.
I was like, wait, brief college trip with friends. I was like, spring break? Did you
Myrtle
come
Beach?
for spring
Maybe
break?
Myrtle Beach.
She's heard of Myrtle Beach. Please say you got a temporary tattoo. Awesome. So you've been in Charleston this morning. Who all did you talk to down there? What did y'all do?
I had one of the more intense but really amazing discussions with a group of students at the College of Charleston.
Awesome.
And it was about gun violence prevention. And typically, I've had roundtables in New Hampshire and in Las Vegas on gun violence prevention. And it has been mainly focused on hearing from the people around the table. The students this morning just came prepared with some really tough, good, productive
Really?
questions.
So they were grilling you?
Yeah, they put me on the spot.
Wow.
We should have sent our microphone there because they're gonna.
Yeah,
you're gonna be
fun.
like, these questions are easy compared to
No,
the
I'll take the easy ones.
Awesome. So my brother's actually a student at College of Charleston, and it's interesting I'm about 10 years older than him, like watching him watch the election and how he perceives it as a first-time voter in a presidential cycle. I feel like they have so much excitement and they're passionate, and gun control is a huge issue for that generation, I guess what we call Gen Z these days. I feel so old that there's a generation below me.
Don't even get me started.
But yeah, Gen Zers are super passionate about it. I mean, they grew up like a lot of us did, but even more so doing active shooter trainings in their schools and
Right.
practicing, huddling under desk. And, for folks who are listening who aren't aware, who didn't grow up in this world, like when I went through it, and I think Chris and Courtney would probably be the same, like we pretty much locked our doors and hid. And like now they teach kids to fight back against active shooters, which is absolutely insane to me. That
What is it, like run, hide, fight?
Yeah, how they teach kids to fight folks in these situations. It boggles my mind. So maybe kind of explain to us how gun control has become such an important issue for you specifically and for the campaign as a whole. And I know it's really personal and affected your all's hometown just this year.
Well, when we were running for the U.S. Senate in Texas, it was certainly an important issue and something that Beto talked very openly and honest about. Some people in Texas would say, you can't talk about guns, you're in Texas. But he would, and he would talk about the need for universal background checks and closing the loopholes, red flag laws. But, and everywhere we went, we would see red Moms Demand Action shirts. And so really became much more familiar with kind of all of these voices that were counter NRA voices that were kind of bringing common sense gun violence prevention to the forefront of the discussion. But it really honestly wasn't until August 3rd when someone drove 10 hours into our community and within minutes killed 22 people, that I think it really shook both me and Beto, and came to the realization that we weren't going to meet this challenge by kind of accepting the status quo, that we had to be as strong and passionate and urgent about this as possible.
Well, that's really, I think it's impressive that you made a topic of his Senate run when he's running in Texas, a very gun-friendly state. Now he's campaigning in South Carolina, and you're here on his behalf. What are some of the finer points of kind of being aggressive about gun control and gun safety in a state that's otherwise, pretty gun-friendly?
So I think, like you said, coming from Texas, there's a long history of proud gun owners, and fully respect that. But I think that there are a lot of nuances to the conversation that if you take the time to meet people where they are and engage in that conversation, sometimes if it's, it's going to be uncomfortable, you can really get down to the heart of the conversation, and disarm some of those fears that people have about confiscation and, this is a slippery slope to taking all of my guns away. So I think that's really what we're trying to do is go everywhere and talk to everyone about all the issues, but particularly some of those that people very easily twist and turn, and unless you're on the ground engaging in that conversation, you can't really get to the meat of it.
And in your earlier comments, you talked a little bit about some of the ways that South Carolina is similar to Texas, like don't touch our guns, something like that. I think it's also important for us to remember too that we also experienced tragedy in Charleston.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the Mother Emanuel massacre really hit home for a lot of folks. And I'm sure some of the students that you talked to this morning would have been in school when that happened. And can you just talk to us a little bit about how a community heals from something like that? I know the incident in El Paso was much more recent, but have you seen any commonalities or things that have worked for a community?
So I think we have seen across this country, particularly with mass shootings, where you see a community come together to support the victims, the survivors, those that just feel traumatized by even being in the community that has gone through something like that come together in the most beautiful way. We saw that in El Paso through hundreds of people lining up at blood donation centers or making contributions or showing up at a visitation for a woman whose husband said he had no family. And so, hundreds of El Pasoans came out to be at her visitation and be there to support him. But I think, what we are now seeing is people returning to their day-to-day lives. But at the same time, those people that were affected, this is going to be a part of their life forever, whether it is the physical recovery or the emotional recovery. This is something that is going to be a really challenging future for them. And so for me, the way that I best see serving them is through being a part of Moms Demand Action or through going to college campuses, which, for so long, elected officials have completely ignored because, typically college students haven't turned out to vote. And so why give them the time of day? But we are
in a state that makes it very hard for college kids to vote as well.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So I think, by energizing people and giving them a voice and giving them a reason to stand up and get involved is the way Beto and I see it is the best way to be of service to the people that have been victims in El Paso.
Yeah. So, everything happens in El Paso in August, and Beto pauses campaigning and comes home, and you all take some time as a family. And, once Beto comes back on the road, he was different. For folks on a national level who don't know him day to day, like us and everybody listening, he was very different. Aggressive wasn't the right word, but he
fired up, maybe.
Fire in his belly. He was ready to go.
Pissed.
Was that was that a change that you all noticed as a family? Like, is that typical Beto that we're gonna see? Is how what's that transition like of his personality that we've all seen been like for y'all that have known him for a long time?
No, to me that was just so clearly who he is, and we joke that being in a presidential election, there is a lot of scrutiny, and every little thing gets critiqued. And I feel like sometimes that can be a little bit stifling. And so I joke with Beto, before he's going to go into something serious, about just kind of going out there and just like knocking the table over and like really just be who you are. And at the end of the day, if that's not what people are into, that's okay. And so I feel like what happened in El Paso was him kicking the table over and just saying, like, we just got to do this all out and not worry about what people are going to say, and I just need to be who I am and be honest and direct, and not afraid to call things like I see them.
Well, I have enjoyed watching it personally. I like it.
Me too.
So I do want to switch gears a little bit and talk about some other things that you're passionate about. So I have it on good authority that you are a strong advocate for women, and I want to talk a little bit about your personal story, but also Beto's Women's Equality Plan. But I'm really just interested in how this connects to you, because I know you are a parent, you have been a business owner, so like, weave me a tale.
Weave you a tale.
Yes.
In like 30 seconds, right?
I mean,
Take your
do what
time.
you can.
Okay, so this is my rapid fire story. I was born in Chicago. Age 8, moved to New Mexico. My dad retired, was going to be a rancher. So
Nice.
grew up
It's quite the transition.
moving, riding horses, moving cattle, like really thought that would be a large part of my life. Graduated from high school, wanted to get away, went across the country for my undergraduate degree, and then still eager to explore the world. And so I taught kindergarten in Guatemala City for a year after college, which not only gave me the opportunity to just learn a ton about education, particularly dual language education, but also the chance to travel across every corner of Guatemala and then through Central America. Was looking to come back to the States and ended up moving to El Paso, where my family was all moving to. Got set up on a blind date with Beto.
Really? Blind date?
So
Blind
those do
dates.
work. Got it.
They do.
If anybody has any blind date suggestions for Courtney, we're taking them now.
And this was before
face is no.
the time of dating apps. So my aunt
right.
called him up, guilted him into taking me out, and then here we are, 15 years later, 3 kiddos. Once I knew I was going to be in El Paso much longer than I had expected, I kind of reached out and started looking at opportunities and ended up working for a nonprofit to open a school, which was an absolutely incredible experience. When Beto was elected to Congress, I switched gears and took over the company that he had started. And most recently I really felt the itch to get back into education, so I sold the business, and I'm now working for a nonprofit again in education.
And what about the Women's Equality Plan? How does that
right.
factor into? You've told us a lot of. It seems like there's a lot of common themes that would be assisted or helped or supported by a robust Women's Equality Plan.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I was just having this great conversation with a woman, Melissa, who's leading the effort in the state to get more women elected to office.
Yeah,
And
Melissa Watson emerged.
Yes.
Yeah.
Shout
Ooh,
out.
We love Emerge, ladies.
Yeah.
She was really amazing. And she said it in such a great way that I'm probably not going to do justice, but she said women's issues are family issues, they're community issues. They transcend everything. And so, I feel really proud of the policies that Beto's putting forward on women's issues, and not only because they're good policies, but I think also in the way that we've come up with those policies. And it is just the way Beto operates. He's going everywhere, talking to everyone, hearing their stories. When we were running for U.S. Senate in Texas, we had no idea that there was a maternal mortality crisis in the state. And it wasn't till we engaged with people and found that out and learned from them what the solutions were that we were able to then take that back and include it in part of our platform. And so I just feel like every trip I take, I learn more and more about the needs and then also what those solutions can be.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Can I go back to the blind date for a second?
Are you going to ask for advice on
No. What was Beto doing at the time when you first met him? Like, was he still in the band? Where was he in life?
He was. I never saw him perform in the band. Like I saw some. I saw some of the costumes that had been part of the band, but.
Courtney's like, were there secrets?
There was a sheep's mask.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
But so he had 4 or 5 years before that started Stanton Street, which was the web and software development business.
Okay.
And then 2 weeks after I met him, he launched his campaign for city council.
Wow. Did you know did you know on that first date? That
I did not know on that first date, and when he told me,
he was withholding information.
I almost went running.
Okay, so this is a really good segue
That's
here.
the next question I want to ask. Go ahead.
I need some advice.
Okay.
So I have been with my boyfriend for 3 years, and I told him on our very first date that I was like, someday I might run for public office.
That's what you opened with?
That wasn't the opening line.
Just checking.
At some point in this first date, I was like, that's on my list at some point in life. So fast forward now to like over the past few months, I've been talking about it very seriously for 2020. And I mean, we're very transparent here and very honest. And just as a family, we decided that it just wasn't the right time for me to run for public office. But how does that conversation go in a family? Like, how do you have that conversation? How does Beto come to you, and how do y'all go to the kids and say, hey, Dad's gonna run for Congress, hey, Dad's gonna run for Senate, hey, Dad's gonna run for president? Like, how do you have that conversation? How do you facilitate that? And as a spouse, what did you think your role would be in all of that, and what has it really become?
Yeah, those are a lot of questions.
Sorry, I know.
So when I met Beto, he shortly thereafter started his city council campaign and then served on city council for 6 years. In 2010, I was pregnant with our third son, Henry, and he came to me. I can remember we were sitting in a car in a parking lot, like spontaneous, like this was not a planned out conversation. And he said, I think I want to run for Congress. And I may have been emotional because I was pregnant, but I just burst into tears because I was so afraid that being part of, DC politics would change him, and that honestly I was afraid he was going to become an asshole.
Fair.
But
Fair. I think most people would be.
But 2 years later, we were really starting to pay attention to our representation in DC and decided to give it a shot. And so, it was never like, we're going to do this and you got to get on board. It has always been very much a conversation. In literally the day after President Trump was elected, like we turned to each other and we knew that we had to do something. We weren't totally sure what that was, but it was very much both of us like, we have got to change the course of this national conversation because it's taken a really dangerous tone, and we've seen that now come to fruition. And so I think we felt that same sense of urgency in this race. And really, with our kids now who are 12, 11, and our son just turned 9 on Sunday, they needed to be a part of that conversation too. But it was never like a forced sit down, this is what we're thinking, what do you think? Ulysses, you tell me, now Molly, you tell me. Like,
Everybody put a secret ballot in your hat.
It was very organic. Like my daughter Molly, I can remember in early March, we were driving to school and she said, so do you think Dad's going to run for president? And I said, I don't know. That's a big decision. And she said, well, if he's going to do it, he better get in the race because he had already started his Senate campaign last time.
Wow.
And
She's so smart.
Yeah.
she's our little strategist. And so, they each we would allow them to really express themselves and gear the conversation kind of at their direction.
That's awesome. Well, I think you all are doing a fantastic job. There's, a few candidates in the race that have younger children, which is unique-ish, I guess. That's not something that we've seen in a long, long time.
We have younger candidates for the first time in a long, long time.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, we have a few younger candidates, which feels great. We have candidates that are still talking about having kids or creating families. So it's exciting for millennials like us to see folks that we feel like we relate to. And y'all have been pretty transparent, and Beto will post making breakfast with the family when he's home. We see the kids. So y'all are doing a fantastic job, and I think regardless of how things turn out, we just thank y'all and the family for hopping in and being part of the conversation. It is a really important time, and a lot of voices are crucial for us to hear, and Beto's brought a lot of energy, but we're really excited that you came to South Carolina.
Oh, well, thanks for having me.
Yeah, we hope you'll be back.
It's been great.
So, did you get barbecue yet? You need to get some barbecue.
No, I had some great...
Tonight. Oh, the staff is all like, it's coming tonight. Awesome.
Well, next time come visit us in Greenville.
Yes.
Yeah.
But we will let y'all...
Beto has said, his Greenville visits have just been amazing.
Oh, good.
I saw him at Clemson, and it was pouring rain. I was drenched, and all the kids were still showing up. And this is when I first felt old. Old Town Road had just come out, and they played it. And I was like, what is this song that all the kids are singing? And I had to literally get in the car and get on Spotify, and I was like, what is this song? I know I was old. But anyways, thank you so much for coming today. We're so excited to have you. You guys are welcome back anytime.
Awesome.
Whether it's in Columbia, Greenville, we will follow y'all to Charleston. But we'll talk soon.
Well, good to meet you. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And we are back again. Just a huge thank you to Amy O'Rourke and her team, Christina, and everybody that was involved in making this happen. A massive shout out to South Carolina's own Phil Dudley, who was a Beto staffer who really plugged us in and got this ball rolling. Amy was extremely gracious and very open and honest, and we had some good conversation after the interview wrapped, where she encouraged all of us to plug into the political process in whatever way we saw fit, and how we best thought our skill set could be used in our own communities. So I really do appreciate that. You kind of heard me at the end of the interview thanking her for the efforts that her and her family have put in, regardless of how this goes. And we've since learned, since our interview, that Beto has dropped out of the presidential race and has said that he will not be running for any public office in 2020. So I think the O'Rourke family is going to get to take a much-needed break, but we definitely will hear more from them in the future around gun control issues and issues that matter to them, and I think their voices will be ones that we hear again in the future. So again, thank you so much to Amy and everybody who made this happen. As always, you can follow along with all of our Podmetto activities on social media, on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. We are at Podmetto. You can always follow along with Chris Fideli and Courtney Thomas and myself on our social media pages as well. And then, as always, a big shout out to our producer, Jake Irwin, for pulling this all together, and especially this episode. He's going to edit it pretty quick for us to get this turnaround done. So thank you so much to Jake, and we will be back very soon with more exciting episodes and special guests. Thank y'all.